everyone, welcome to another mini lesson. This time we're in Chapter 9 and the nervous system. Let's start with some basic anatomy and the functions and structure of the nervous system. Your nervous system has 5 basic functions. They are sensory input, motor output, evaluation and integration, homeostasis, and mental activity. You should note there's a typo in your textbook for the second one. It should be motor output, not motor input. So just a quick overview. Sensory input involves the brain receiving information from receptors located all over the body at the both conscious and unconscious levels. Think about using all of your 5 senses, seeing, touching, smelling, feeling, along with other stimuli that you may not be aware of, like monitoring oxygen and carbon dioxide levels in your body, fluid volume levels, acid-base levels. They are all continuously processed by your nervous system. Motor output from the brain stimulates skeletal muscle to contract and cause movement. The same type of stimulation also causes smooth muscles in the walls of organs and blood vessels to constrict and move as needed. Sweat, saliva, and digestive enzymes are also controlled by the nervous system. Evaluation and integration involves taking sensory input, initiating a motor response, and then storing that event as memory for later use. Homeostasis you probably learned about in anatomy class, and we'll talk more about it in later chapters, but this involves maintaining a stable internal environment. For example, if we start running, our muscles demand more blood and more oxygen, and our bodies respond by dilating blood vessels and airways and causing our hearts to beat more quickly. These responses are regulated by the nervous system. And finally, mental activity occurs in the brain, so processes like thinking, feeling, understanding, and responding, and storing memories take place in the brain. The nervous system is separated into 2 divisions: the central nervous system, or CNS, and the peripheral nervous system, or PNS. The central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system consists of everything else. All the neurons, the nerves, the ganglia, and the plexus, everything outside of the central nervous system is considered the peripheral nervous system. So the central nervous system is easy. It's just the brain and the spinal cord. We'll talk more about the anatomy of the brain and the spinal cord a little bit later. The peripheral nervous system is a little bit tricky because it has more subdivisions. The PNS has 2 major divisions, the sensory division and the motor division. The sensory division consists of afferent nerves which carry messages toward the spinal cord and brain from the sense organs. The motor division consists of efferent nerves which carry messages away from the brain and spinal cord out to the muscles, skin, and bones. So afferent and efferent sound very similar and are very easy to confuse. I've studied a lot of anatomy and taught anatomy for a long time, and I still struggle to remember which one is which. So in my simple brain, I remember afferent starts with A, so those carry signals that arrive at the brain. And efferent starts with E, so those nerves carry signals that exit the brain. The next 2 terms you need to know are visceral and somatic. Remember, visceral means internal organs or organs, and somatic refers to body, or in this case, think muscles and bones. So visceral nerves carry signals from the viscera or organs in the thorax and the abdomen, like the heart and the lungs, the stomach, the intestines, organs like that. And the somatic nerves carry signals from the skin, the muscles, the bones, and the joints. So if we look at this chart, within each division of the PNS, there's a visceral and somatic division. There's a visceral sensory division, a somatic sensory division, a visceral motor division, and a somatic motor division. Sounds super confusing, right? Just remember what each term means individually. The somatic sensory division would bring information from the skin, muscles, bones, structures like that, to the brain and spinal cord along the afferent nerves. The somatic motor division carries signals from the brain and spinal cord along efferent nerves to those same structures and cause some sort of response. And this is usually under voluntary control. To remember which types of nerves are efferent or afferent, you can use the mnemonic SAME, which stands for sensory afferent and motor efferent. Now, to make things even more complicated, the visceral motor division is also called the autonomic nervous system, or ANS, and it's divided into the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. The sympathetic system is sometimes referred to as our fight or flight response, And it sounds kind of confusing, but when I teach this in anatomy, I use Scooby-Doo. And the autonomic nervous system can be understood through one episode of Scooby-Doo. Okay, so here it is. So the sympathetic nervous system gets triggered when our body is getting geared up to either flee from something scary or to fight. So in Scooby-Doo, when they are getting ready to run from the big scary monster, their sympathetic nervous system goes into action. The sympathetic response causes our heart rate to increase, to pump more blood, the blood vessels dilate, the respiratory rate increases, it dilates our airways to allow more oxygen into our lungs, the blood vessels dilate to supply the heart and the muscles with more blood, our pupils dilate to allow more light into our eyes to see better, we get a surge of glucose that's released into our bloodstream for a quick boost of energy. All these things gear our bodies up to either fight the scary monster or to run away from the threat. At the same time, blood flow is decreased to unnecessary functions like digestion, so the blood can be redirected where it's needed most. When the threat has passed, in Scooby-Doo, let's say they've caught the villain, they've unmasked him, everything has settled down, and the gang meets at the sandwich shop and they're all hanging out. The parasympathetic system takes over and it counteracts the effects of the sympathetic system. So now the parasympathetic system takes over and it decreases the heart rate back down to normal, it decreases the size of the airways back to normal, and it basically returns the body back to its normal resting state. The parasympathetic system stimulates things like digestion, so that takes over when we see Shaggy and Scooby eating at the sandwich shop or the pizza shop at the end of the episode. So there you go, sympathetic and parasympathetic wrapped up in one episode of Scooby-Doo. Okay, so now let's talk about the cells that make up the nervous system. The nervous system consists of neurons, which are nerve cells that send messages or stimuli to other neurons or to receptors in the muscles or organs. The cell body is the main part of the neuron, and it has these extensions all around it called dendrites. Dendrites receive stimuli from other neurons and transmit that stimuli to the cell body. An axon is a single nerve fiber that arises from the cell body and looks like a long tail extending outward. The axon receives stimuli from the cell body and transmits that stimuli to another neuron, or what we call an effector, which is just another muscle or organ. Axons are covered in a myelin sheath that surround it like a layer of insulation, and this layer is called the neurolemma. This layer allows the electrical impulses to be transmitted faster because the impulse jumps between the empty spaces in the myelin. So although myelin is an insulator, it actually allows neuro impulses to be transmitted faster. A synapse is a junction or space between two neurons or between a neuron and an effector. The end of the synapse is called the synaptic terminal and contains vesicles full of chemicals called neurotransmitters. And neurotransmitters assist or inhibit the transmission of a stimulus across the synapse. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter that stimulates muscles to contract. Norepinephrine is a neurotransmitter that stimulates many areas of the CNS, and it has an effect of a stimulant like cocaine or amphetamines. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that also stimulates many areas of the CNS, and it's a mood stabilizer, and it's often involved in eating, sleeping, and digesting. Dopamine has many functions, and it's involved in motivation and reward, arousal, reinforcement, and inhibition of excess muscular activity. It's sometimes called our happy hormone because it's associated with the high of getting something you want, like our reward system, whether it's good for you or not. And endorphins, you've probably heard of endorphins, those are the body's natural pain reliever. And the word endorphin is a combination of the word endo, meaning within, and morphine. We just remove the M from the word morphine to make pronunciation easier. The term ganglia refers to a collection of nerve cell bodies outside of the CNS. Just note that the term ganglion is the singular form of the word. We use the term nerve to describe a bundle of axons wrapped together along with blood vessels and connective tissue in the peripheral nervous system. Don't confuse the term nerve with neuron. Neuron is an actual nerve cell. Nerve is a group of axons all wrapped up together with connective tissue and blood vessels. And the term plexus refers to a network or web of nerves that are joined together. And we find these in various places around the body. The cervical plexus is in the neck, the brachial plexus is in the arms, and the lumbosacral plexus is in the pelvis and supplies the legs. Some more types of nervous system cells. Neuroglia are support cells within the nervous system. Glia comes from the word glue, so think of these cells as glue or supporting structures in the nervous system. Each type of neuroglia or glial cells has a specific function. Astrocytes are the most abundant type of cells. We have the most of them. Astro means star, and they are involved in water and sodium transport. Oligodendrocytes help form the myelin sheath. We saw the prefix oligo before. It means few or scant, so these cells have very few dendrocytes on their cell bodies. Microglia are small cells that clean up cellular debris. Ependymal cells are important neuroglial cells. They line the central canals of the spinal cord and the ventricles of the brain, and they help regulate the formation of cerebrospinal fluid, or CNS. Schwann cells form myelin sheaths in the peripheral nervous system that help speed up the transmission of nerve signals. And satellite cells are found around the neuron cell bodies, and their function is not well understood yet. And you see this term gray matter and white matter. White matter is bundles of myelinated axons in the central nervous system. Gray matter is the neuron cell bodies, dendrites, and synapses, and they appear gray when you're looking at a cross-section of either the brain or the spinal cord. The blood-brain barrier is a physical barrier between the blood cells that supply the central nervous system and the neurons of the CNS. The blood-brain barrier protects the brain against foreign substances, toxins, and infection. It's pretty amazing because it protects the brain against a lot of harmful substances, but it also makes treating infections in the brain very difficult because most medications are blocked from reaching the brain. Okay, so here's some terminology review. Afferent and efferent, I feel like we covered those terms, but they're still pretty confusing. Afferent means conducting impulses toward the CNS. Remember A, arriving at the brain, and efferent means conducting impulses away from the CNS. Remember E, exiting the brain. Ganglia are collections of nerve cell bodies outside the CNS. Remember the difference between a neuron and a nerve is a neuron is a nerve cell, and a nerve is a collection of axons and blood vessels wrapped in connective tissue. And finally, a plexus is a network or web of nerves that are joined together. This slide just reviews some root words from this section of the text. Some of these are from the case report at the beginning of the chapter. So ner means nerve, seize means to grab or convulse, sense means to feel, surge means to operate, tone means pressure or tension, diagnost means decision, electro means electricity, encephal means brain, and epilept means seizure. And for roots like electro, we can combine it with another root like cephalo, meaning head, and various suffixes to make words like electroencephalogram, electroencephalograph, electroencephalography. And for epilept, we can make words like epileptic, epilepsy, and anti-epileptic. So that's it for this video. Thanks for your attention, and I'll see you in the next section when we look at the brain and cranial nerves. Thanks.